Hello, my name is Jim McGillivray and welcome to the Pipe Box, your source for all things piping. If you find this video useful, please give it a like and please subscribe to this YouTube channel to see more videos like this in future. Today I would like to do a competition Strathspey with you. The tune is Maggie Cameron. It's one of our best known and most played competition Strathspeys, and it's played at pretty much all levels. It's not our easiest Strathspey, but it's not our hardest either. The fact is, most competition Strathspeys are challenging. Maggie Cameron was the wife of Donald Cameron, one of the premier players in the 19th century. Donald Cameron lived from 1810 until 1868. His wife, Margaret MacKenzie, Maggie Cameron, lived another 10 years after he did. We're not sure who wrote the tune. It's listed as a traditional tune, meaning we don't know who the composer is. Both Donald Cameron and Maggie Cameron and other famous pipers in the family are buried in Inverness, in the High Kirk churchyard. If you have an interest in piping history and go to Inverness, I suggest a visit to the High Kirk churchyard and have a look at the Cameron grave. It's a piece of history worth seeing. We see Maggie Cameron published in 4 parts around the turn of the century and the late 1800s. David Glenn, James Bett, Logan, all published it at a time when 4-parted Strathspeys were just coming into vogue. Before this time, Strathspeys were all 2 parts, and often Strathspeys were played a couple or 3 times to make up 4 or 6 parts. It's probable that this started as a 2-parted tune earlier in the 19th century and was eventually turned into a 4-parted tune. Many of our 4-parted Strathspeys started as 2-parted tunes, often with different title. It's a very common pattern with a lot of our earliest tunes. Strathspeys are highly technical and they tax a piper's technical prowess when they are played at tempo. I'm going to assume for this video that you know how to play all of the technique in Maggie Cameron. We may go over some of the technique to figure out how to play it more rhythmically or a little bit better, but this video is mostly about music, and music within the context of the tune's technique. At the end of this video, I will play the tune in its entirety, but we will go through the tune now part by part. And I want you to pay particular attention to how pointed the Strathspey is, more so than almost any other time signature we play. I'll be stressing this all the way through the video, so watch the pointing. Here is the first part. We're going to approach this Strathspey a little bit differently from the norm. Usually when we talk about rhythm in Strathspeys, we hear people say strong, weak, medium, weak. In other words, a strong first beat, a weak second beat, a medium strength third beat, and a weak fourth beat. This is what you'll usually hear bass drummers play in pipe bands, and it works quite well in that context. For our purposes, we're going to stress the bars a little bit differently. I want to stress the first beat and the fourth beat in each bar. So instead of strong, weak, medium, weak, we're going to have strong, medium, medium, strong. So you're going to hold the first E in bar 1, and you're going to hold the low A at the end of bar 1. And that pattern will continue throughout the whole tune. Strong, medium, medium, strong. Like that. You can see just by holding the first and the last beat in each bar a little bit longer, you start to generate some good strathspey rhythm in this tune, or any other strathspey for that matter. Let's look a little more carefully at bar 1. In bar 1 of the first part, we see 2 C doublings down to low A with an E grace note on the low A. It's the most common pattern in strathspey playing, and it's crucial that we learn how to play it well. In the bars shown here, you'll see this movement written in 2 ways. In bar 1, you'll see it the way we see it in our pipe music, a C doubling on a 16th note followed by a low A with an E grace note on it. In bar 2, you'll see the way we actually play it, and as you can see, it's a much smoother looking movement. If I play these 2 bars, they sound the same, and they should. Resist the temptation to play a doubling on the C and pause before you go down to the low A. It's a smooth 1, 2, 3, G, D, E. Hackatum, hackatum, hickatum, hickatum. So keep them nice and open in the tune in the first bar and make sure you hold the E's. Watch you don't crush the C doublings. We should hear each grace note distinctly. That's bar 1, and an important bar it is. Bar 2, the point I want to make in bar 2 is how strongly pointed strathspeys are. So in bar 2 we see an E 8th note with a doubling on it, followed by a 16th, and then a low A 8th note with a dot on it, followed by a 16th note. If this were written out the way we play it, we would probably put a double dot on the E and a double cut on the C and a double dot on the low A. That's how pointed we want to play it. The short notes are extremely short, but they're just audible. You can tell what note it is. So point these couplets as much as you can anytime you encounter them in the tune. That's bar 2. And then a pause at the end of the bar. Bar 3 is the same. Bar 4 is a mirror of bar 2. And again, you're going to point that as much as you can. It's a tockum down to the low G. So it's going to be very short, but it's going to be audible. It's not going to be crushed. We're still going to hear that tockum on B. That's bar 4. Bar 5 is the same as bar 1. Bar 6 is the same as bar 2, but for a little run right at the end of bar 6. So bar 6 goes like this. Well pointed again. Often in pipe music you will see those 3 notes at the end of that bar, the high A, G, and F, written as a triplet with a 3 above them. We don't play them as triplets. We play them almost exclusively with the last note held just a little bit. So we still tend to call them triplets, but the last note is always held. Whenever you encounter one of these triplets, make sure you hold the note before it as long as you can. So bar 6, he-ba-dum-ba-dee, a-diddle-dee, dee-ba-dum-ba-dee, a-diddle-dee. And don't crush the little run from the high A. In bar 7, we have a similar run that can be played in two ways. So if I play bar 7 for you, that's a difficult pattern there, to play that short C with a D grace note on it up to a short E and back down to a low A. Some people like to play this bar like this. And you can take your choice. I prefer what is written in the music here, as I believe that was what was traditionally played. So bar 7 again. And then bar 8 is the same as bar 4, and that completes our first part. Let's move on to part number 2. As we go through this part and subsequent parts, I'm going to brush over bars or patterns that we have already done. So the first part, we spent a lot of time on that, and we'll be able to spend a little less time on each subsequent part, and you can go back over the video at your leisure. The second part is very light and airy and dance-like. It harkens back to the reason strathspeys were originally written, which was to accompany dancers. Later on, as I mentioned, around the time this tune was written, around 1900, strathspeys were being written specifically for competition. 4 and even 6 part of strathspeys written specifically for competition. But they still keep their strathspey traits, and they can be very dancey. This part is very dancey. Da-dee-dum, ba-dee-dee, ha-da-lee, ha-da-lee, da, ba-dee-dee. We've already talked about how much I want you to point the dotted 8th notes and cut the 16th notes. So that applies all the way through line 1 and line 2 of this tune. The trick is to hold the dotted notes as long as you can, but keep the short notes audible. For example, in bar 9, we have a short high A in the middle of the bar, followed by a short E. And it's a bit of a challenge to make sure that both of those notes are audible while the long note is held. So the E and the high A, the short notes, have to be audible. The half doubling on C, also make sure you're not crushing a half doubling. Very much the same as we talked about the G, D, E doublings in the first part. Takatum, takatum. This is a half doubling, but the sound is the same. And then at the end of bar 1, the high A, bar 9, the high A, hold it before you go to the little run down to the E in bar 10. Okay, remember our strong, medium, medium, strong principle that's going to follow us all the way through this tune. Bar 11 is very similar to bar 9. Again, dotted notes, cut notes, point them, and cut them. Bar 13 and 14 are structured the same as bars 9 and 10. Bar 15 is a little bit tricky. It has another one of these 3-note patterns that isn't quite the same as the rest that we're playing. We're holding the last note in these little triplet patterns. In this case, in bar 15, in the middle of that bar, we're going to hold the middle note. So, bar 15. That can be tricky to play that high A followed by a very short low A and an E doubling, to be able to play that cleanly and not get a squeak, and make sure you get a nice clean E doubling off the low A. And then you're going to hold that E. Again, it's the last long note in the bar before you go off to the last bar. Okay, that is part 2. Let's go to part 3. The third part can be kind of a make it or break it part for some people. You need to be able to play a burl with a G grace note on it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in this part. So if you have trouble with burls, or your burl is not really advanced enough yet to play these effectively, this may not be the tune for you. But if you have a good burl, this is a great chance to show them off. In the first 2 bars, bars 17 and 18, again we're going to have the long dotted notes. You're going to wait on the first E dotted 8th note as long as you can before you hit the burl. And you're going to do that all the way through that part. Wait as long as you can before you hit the burl. But don't rush off the low A after the burl. So you need to be able to play a nice, again, a C doubling. It's not a G, D, E, goes up to E, not down to low A this time. And you need to be able to play a strong burl with the G grace note on the beat. And don't necessarily try to play your burl as fast as you can. Play it rhythmically, play it clearly and rhythmically. In bar 19, it's a little tricky at the start of the bar in that we have a short F with a half doubling on it. You'll often hear this tune played with that F held. So what we have written here is you'll also hear although I prefer the setting that we have printed here. So all the way through that part, your burls are crucial. Your burls and your C doublings are absolutely crucial. And be careful that you don't round the part out because you're trying to make the burls and the C doublings. There has to be lots of pointing here, and it may necessitate your working on your burls and your C doublings. I often find, even with top professional players sometimes, that a musical pattern that they want to achieve and are having trouble with is not because they don't have the music. It's because they don't quite have the technique to play that little bar or that half bar or that phrase exactly the way they want to, and they need to do some rudimental work on technique. So you may need some C doubling work, you may need some burl work. In the second line, bars 23 and 24, we go from a hard technique-ridden part to, again, the very light and dancey feel we had in part 2. And the same rules apply. Long high A before you drop down to the E triplet in the last bar. And that is our technically challenging third part. In the fourth part of this tune, when I play it, I'm just trying to play it as pointed as I possibly can and make all of the technique. It's a challenging part for the top hand. In bar 25, you'll see right in the middle of the bar on F, we have an F doubling with a high A grace note. So that bar would be played. You will hear people play just a half doubling there. And that's quite acceptable. If you're confident playing the full F doubling with a high A grace note, by all means play it. But if that's a real challenge for you, you can play a half doubling there. The other thing that's technically challenging in this part is in bar 26, right at the end of that bar. Playing that grip from C to E. I'm not going to go into the details of grip playing here. There's a video on this channel on grips that you may wish to look at if you have trouble with this movement in this position. The big point I want to make about it in bar 26 is to make sure you hold the high A before you go down to that grip. And again, try to make the C before the grip, hubbity-ha, audible. Bar 27, the rest of this part, we have pretty much touched on every element of it. So let's listen to the whole tune played on a dagger chanter. That Strathspey, for demonstration purposes, was played at around 112 beats per minute. Competition Strathspeys can be played as quickly as 124 beats per minute, but somewhere between 110, 112, and 120 is the norm, depending on your level. For the lower grades, as slow as 104 and maybe 106 in that range would be acceptable. So generally somewhere between 106 and 124, which is quite a range. Remember, keep them pointed, strong, medium, medium, strong. And remember as well, a good way to come to discover the musical nuances in a tune is to sing the tune to the metronome. I always get a lot out of the tune and learn a lot about the tune as I sing or hum or mumble whatever I want to do to the metronome. Hey, ha-ka-dum buddy, ha-ka-dum bick-a-dum buddy, ha. Hagadum-buddy, hagadum-bada, adum-buddy, he, hagadum-buddy, da-dum-bick-a-dum. Takes a bit of getting used to, but you'll find it very helpful once you do. And again, if you're having trouble with the technique in this strathspey or other strathspeys, I might recommend you to my rhythmic finger work tutor, which I've recommended here many times. It has quite a number of exercises dedicated completely to strathspeys. You might find that helpful. That's it for Maggie Cameron for today. For me, Jim McGillivray at the Pipe Box, good piping.